Okay, I will move now that we restart the meeting at 3:49. We have agenda's meeting at 4. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Gibson. Okay, so tuning to page 40 of the agenda. Adoption of draft revenue and financing policy. The recommendation is from Councillor Becker on page 42.
Okay, the recommendation is 1, the report be received, and 2, the council adopt draft revenue and financing policy.
Second, please. Councillor Hay. Are there any comments?
I see on the it's more people read it.
It doesn't say the word rates.
Okay. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion carried. Turning to page 43, adoption of Resource Management Act fees. The recommendation is from Councillor Becker on page 46.
The recommendation is 1, the report be received, 2, council adopt the planning and charge out fee for 2021-2022.
I have a seconder, please. Councillor Gibson. Comments?
This brings us back into line now and takes the burden off the ratepayers here. It's more into a user pay system.
Any more comments there? All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion carried. Moving to page 47, transfer of federal assets to the West Coast Regional Council. The recommendation is on page 49 and is that the report be received, and 2, that council formally transfer the federal asset to the West Coast Regional Council in year 1 for the LTP. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Mora, are there any comments? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Turning to page 50, other feedback received. So thank you again for these submitters. Just because they weren't key didn't mean they're not important. It helps us to know what's going on in our communities. Please know that you can contact council representatives at any time. I expected to be proud there, but not today. We're going through these items separately so we can discuss, if necessary, acknowledge these submissions and recommendations. So, okay. Just turning to the motion, we'll move the report on page 80, the recommendation that the report be received. 2, that council thanks the submissions for their submission. 3, council considers the submissions received against staff comments and suggests recommendations be provided. 4, council notes the feedback received and individual decisions adopted by council and are noted below. I'll move that. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Haddock, thank you. Are there any comments at this stage?
We're going to work through them.
We are. We're just moving this first. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. So turning to page 51. First item here, amalgamate councils. West Coast Regional Council should be amalgamated with other councils. So the suggested recommendation is there, the recommendation that the submitter be advised that this is a government commission decision. I'll move that. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Gibson, are there any comments?
They've already tried it once and tried it.
Okay. Any more? No. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. I trust that you've read most of the recommendations. Yep. You won't read them all, but if you have something to say or comment on them. So the submission on the arts, that council support ongoing arts and value in our community's well-being. So the recommendation is that the submitter be provided with a copy of the officer comments.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Right, all those in favour? Against? Motion carried. The Blackpool community there, so I trust that you have read through those and may have some suggestions there that staff is certainly working through with them. Suggested recommend, or the recommendation is that 1, feedback be received and noted. 2, council advises that it can provide support where appropriate to the Blackpool initiatives. However, no further budget is available from council to undertake additional enhancements in the Blackpool community. 3, council notes that the Blackpool community wishes to tender to undertake the maintenance work in Blackpool, and staff will notify the Blackpool community when the maintenance work is open for tender. 4, council advises that all maintenance contracts must be undertaken on the same basis as all council contracts and all legal obligations fulfilled by tender. Move, please.
I'll second that.
Councillor
I'll comment
O'Reilly.
on that. Please, just a question through the chair. With them taking over the maintenance, how will they, when it comes up for tender, go through our procurement policies being a new contractor?
I mean, for the road maintenance, literally, it's not costing council very much through West Roads. This is the roadside mow.
Yeah.
So equipment is about $3,000 a year.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think on the procurement procedures, it's probably not an issue. Perhaps for some of the other stuff they're looking, and I think it's a very useful suggestion they're raising, to often maintain around the toilets and the car park. Those sums could be more significant, but if you competitively tender and they win, then you've met your procurement obligations.
Just one more point on that. They've asked for the funding from the toilets, to be charged for toilets and showers. It still wouldn't even cover the cleaning costs. I don't think. There wouldn't be any surplus left over the cleaning costs, would it?
No, through you, Madam Mayor, if they want the funds, then they got to clean the toilets. Because the revenue we get from that will go against the cost of maintenance. So there is no separation of those in my view.
Thank you.
I don't think they'd understand even like the insurance, public liability insurance. They probably couldn't afford that for some of these contracts.
I mean, to be fair, they're keen, and I think we shouldn't stifle that. Having said that, we don't want to place ourselves in a situation, but if they are keen to have a crack at it, I'm sure that we can work ways that we at least give them the opportunity to have a go. Because I think, you've seen that's the community spirit. They want to get in.
Yeah, I just wonder if they understand.
Just one more question. Just with they're building a new playground there, which they do themselves, a great initiative. Does that come under our care and maintenance afterwards? Or is that theirs?
That will depend whether it's those assets. We've got a policy on it.
Through the chair, McEwen Park is a private park. It's not a council reserve. It's theirs. So what they asked for in their submission is for council to ensure it. I think that's probably an operational decision.
Well, we probably won't be able to do that. Yes, it's not our asset, not on our land, and we've got no control over it.
Any more comments? All those in favour? Motion carried. Okay, we're just going to adjourn again, and we're going to do it. It is 4:10. I'll now move that we re-adjourn the meeting, and I've seen please Councillor Gibson. Okay, turning back to page 53, bridges and trucks, the submission from Mr. Bruce Stewart. Very good submission, and certainly something that we're aware of. The recommendation is on page 54, and it is that feedback be received and noted. I'll move that to number seconder. Thanks, Councillor Becker. Are there any comments?
He spoke pretty well yesterday. There's a bit of passion in his voice, and it was extremely nervous, but it was well put across. It was very good.
Definitely. Yeah.
And we've started.
The nervous address web in the long-term plan. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thanks. Motion carried. CBD and the works around CBD in the future. The recommendation there is that the submission be provided with a copy of the officer comments. Can I have a mover, please?
Yeah.
Tony. And a seconder, councillor McBride. Are there any comments?
I think Jeff Ball is quite a big player locally with regards to subdivisions and what have you. And I think he did offer to come and speak to council. I think it would be worth considering listening to him.
He does. And
He's more relevant to the Grey District than John Bergen from Richmond that came and spoke to us.
Probably one of the biggest investors, isn't it?
I've had meetings with him, and I've also organised for him to meet with the One District Plan for the works and the zoning and development around town, as well as other developers. But he's certainly very valuable and done some great work. So we have progressed that, and he has met with him since. So that was good that they got onto that straight away. More comments?
Yeah, I agree with Murray. We should get him along to speak as a speaker. That's just on his comments. Really
That
good.
would be great. We'll make a note of that on stage. Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, motion carried. Climate change and the comments around there from Active West Coast and Mrs. Burrell Community Public Health and Public Service Association. So the recommendation is that council advises climate change is a key focus over the coming years, and we will collaborate with the regional and national agencies on this matter. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Mora. Are there any comments?
I'll change like religion, you got no choice.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson.
You're being recorded.
We're certainly working on that with the TPP one as well.
Being recorded.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Community preparedness, encouraging councils to increase community preparedness. Certainly have been working on that with the Civil Defence Committee. So the recommendation is that the feedback be passed on to the West Coast Emergency Management. Can I have a mover, please?
You move it, thanks.
Councillor Haddock and a seconder, Councillor Green. Are there any comments? All those in favour? Against? Motion carried. Cycle pathway from Rapahoe to Greymouth. So submitted there by the Public Service Association. So the recommendation is that council will pass on this feedback to Whakakotahi NZTA. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Gibson and a seconder. Councillor Mora, are there any comments?
I might have seen them put it around that bluff on the common.
This point, Elizabeth.
Oh, it's a friend, no, he did Renanga to Granite, oh, sorry.
It's currently quite a dangerous stretch of road to be riding a bike on.
Councillor Green.
So when they're saying they'll be passing feedback, they're just passing on what they're saying or you're offering. Is what they're saying, basically, isn't it? Any solutions or anything?
What we'll do is pass back the fact that it's NZTA who are managing it, that effectively they should be contacted.
We don't have budget.
All those in favour? Against? Motion carried. Dog registration and the cost of dog registration there. So the recommendation is that submitter be provided a copy of officer comments. It is often a subject that does get brought up with me. So we will get back to that submitter with some information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Becker and seconder, Councillor Gibson. Are there any comments?
As a dog owner.
Brought up
Yeah,
quite
no,
often.
it's crazy.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Drop-off zone, office in CBD outside optometrists. The recommendation is that staff will take this request into consideration as part of the CBD parking strategy, which is being carried out shortly. Can I have a
Have to
mover?
move that.
Seconder, Councillor McDonald. Are there any comments?
Good idea.
Yeah, great idea.
Well worth investigating.
Yeah, definitely, and considering that is broken yellow lines, and I got a $80 ticket the other day for dropping my daughter off to get her paper collection run and then drove off. I think that is a good idea because the oldies no doubt have got the same thing. They might want to be stuck with that.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, motion carried. Development, again from Chief Ball here about the CBD and working together and looking at the investors and how we can improve the CBD. So the recommendation is again that the feedback be received and noted and ask for him to come to council
Happy to move
at
that.
some stage.
I'll second.
Councillor Hay, Councillor Becker, are there any more comments? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, motion carried. Drowning prevention and water safety. Water safety highlights the needs to prevent drowning and water safety. So the recommendation is there that the feedback be received and noted. I'll move that. Councillor Moore, seconder. Are there any comments? All those in favour? Motion carried. Dumping costs too high. To Alex Woods, feedback be received and noted. From a mover, please. Councillor Moore and seconder, Councillor Becker. Are there any comments?
He's had those costs where he is.
Yeah,
And the waste levies again, I mean, we're getting it forced upon us. We certainly know that it's an issue.
I went home from the meeting here the other day and followed a carload of, a ute load of rubbish natives here at the valley. Building waste. We're going to dump.
Those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Year and consultation document. So you're a Blackpool not connected to town water supply by Mr. Maunders. So the recommendation is that the council has apologised, will apologise for that error. I'll move it.
Blackpool did.
Should tell them what.
Any comments there?
Which one?
All those in favour? Aye. Motion carried. Freedom camping. Westburn hospitality. So we have done a lot of work around freedom camping and it will be coming up again with government. Minister Nash reviewing freedom camping. Recommendation is feedback be received and noted. I'll move that. Councillor Brand, are there any comments? Those in favour? Against, motion carried. So funding request. We've had some funding requests here and council declines the request for funding and refuses submitted to the contestable grants fund. Please.
I'll move that.
Councillor Hay and seconder, Councillor Green. Are there any comments around that one?
You can just see what's coming up here as we move into that contestable fund. What will be coming through as well.
I think that when we look at this one, you know, we have to just keep looking at our core services and many of these are from outside the district and we're really just, you know, we're up against it and we have to, you know, look at what's in our community and how we can help them with this that they can and support the people who are working.
Problem is they're all good causes, but as a council, we've only got so much money. Let's stick to our core activities, otherwise our rates go up.
All those in favour? Motion carried. Gambling policy, it's the ones that come in mostly from the active West Coast Community Public Health and Salvation Army through most processes we go through annual reports and long-term plans. The recommendation is the council will note the interest and be in touch with interested stakeholders when it is time to review the gambling policies. I'll move that. Second, please. Councillor Gibson, are there any comments? All those in favour? Heritage, we did discuss that with Stuart Nimmo yesterday that we are working on that in the TPP One District Plan as well. So had a few comments around that. Are there any? I'll move that to seconder. Councillor Mora, on a roll. Are there any comments?
Well answered there.
So the recommendation, oh, sorry. Where am I? Okay. No more comments. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. History House, from Ms. Lucina Brady, a recommendation here and there that the opening house of History House pop-up museum will be reviewed before summer, and that has been in the discussion documents with History House once it was opened and as summer comes along. So it is known to us. Second, Councillor Becker. Are there any comments? Those in favour? Motion carried. Housing, encouraging houses to be built, certainly working on that and advocating in other areas. Council does note the recommendation that it is not intending to be involved in property development, and the submitter being provided with a copy of the office comments. Can I remove, please? Councillor Gibson and a seconder. Councillor Green. Thank you. Are there any comments? All those in favour? Aye. Motion carried. Infrastructure. Again, there were a few submissions there about upgrading infrastructure and water and supported deep increases, what you've read there. So the suggested recommendation is that the feedback be received and noted. Mover, please. Councillor Becker. Seconder, Councillor Hay. Are there any comments there?
Worship, please, just one, Paul Berry spoke about yesterday for that McGee's Hill, just through the chair to Mel, would that be a consideration, that road safety there?
Yeah, we can look at that. You also talked about Deep Creek and Rough and Tumble Creek.
Yep.
And I think when we get to the late submission from NZTA, probably talk about that a little bit more. Yeah.
Perhaps after discussion with that, after Councillor Berry, not of Councillor, after Paul Berry's submission there on McGee's Hill too, it may be that we just can budget in some daylighting, you know, some cutting back the scrub to sort of alleviate some of the problems there. Maybe a short-term solution to long-term solutions found.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Jellyman Park Car Park. This is one that has come up to us quite a few times, but the NEWA report at the time had arrived after the work had been completed. The recommendation that the feedback be received and noted, and the submitters be advised that the NEWA report was received after the Jellyman Car Park was upgraded for some of our time, but I'll remove, please. Councillor Gibson and seconder, Councillor Moore. Are there any comments around
I'm
this?
so pleased it's going to be in the public.
Yeah, absolutely. We need that a lot.
We have worn that a lot through this consultation process.
Valuable lesson, I think, for us, even if we didn't have the report, but it's going to teach us something in the future that we are susceptible to big events like that, and we'll be looking at things a lot more careful before we invest around the coastline, I think.
Well, I think we were really pushed on that one because it was government money from memory for the tourism freedom campus or toilets or something, whatever.
I think that was the
We
only
had
one on the
not
front
much
door.
choice.
My time.
A lot of that will be covered in the 1.2 going forward, though, areas where you can't do things in the coast and rivers.
Yeah, that'd be great when that comes out.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. I had a drop-in centre sessions from Mr. and Mrs. Jane Culling. The suggested recommendation is that feedback noted and thanks in the submitter be provided with a copy of the comments. I'll move that. Comments, please. Councillor Greens. I do believe that the drop-in centres actually went very well, and I believe as public meetings sometimes it is the same people that are talking all the time, and the shyer people or the quieter people don't actually get to have their say, and I think they worked quite well. So there wasn't a lot of great turnout, but Mr. and Mrs. Culling had most of us to themselves for the whole meeting, so we hopefully we got their points through, and I do think that they were quite a good model, and
We can't make people turn up. All we can do is give them the opportunity.
they're quite.
And hopefully in the
enjoyed some
future,
of them.
more of them might take advantage.
I agree too. You know, we a lot of the Dobson ones were people from Kayata, you know, so maybe next time we actually should hold it in Kayata rather than Dobson, but I don't think we need it in each individual little place because you otherwise, you know, as approved in some of the meetings, we only had 3 or 4 of some of them, so.
It's possible to mix it up a bit in terms of maybe have a little bit of a public meeting at the start where you're putting information out rather than relying on just reading things, and then break for the question times through the mingling.
suggestion next time.
I just think that, having a public meetings like a Renanga would have been, probably a slang match.
Yeah, just the presentation
Yeah.
of information and then break up. And then people make up.
There was no real heat. It was, if someone got tempered, it was pretty quick to put it out.
Yeah,
Like the
that's
one-on-one discussion isn't like standing on a podium and getting screamed at. So I think it
Everyone
went
feeding
pretty
off
well.
each other.
I think the previous meeting, Renanga, there was 3 people wound up.
Yeah.
But the last one was good.
Well, I think there were other people for actually coming and discussing it. As I said, there was some very loud voices in the media that never turned up to the meeting. So the people that were there, they talked sensibly and we worked through some good solutions. So it's very good.
It's a good idea.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Kaiata Water and Sewer, again from Mr. and Mrs. Jean Cullen, Michael and Jean Cullen. Recommendation is that the submission be provided a copy of the officer's comments. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Gibson, are there any comments there? I do note that the pipes for the water and the sewage was one of those questions there, and they were at different times, so it wasn't done at the same time. So those in favour?
Can I just, hold on, I might be under that. No, he'll be right. Thank you.
Motion against? Motion carried. Liquor licence applications, community and public health. The recommendation is that the feedback's received and noted. Please. Seconded, Councillor Green. Any comments? All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Living wage, from the Public Service Association. The feedback there, council is not considering moving to the living wage at this stage. I'll move that. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Hay. Any comments?
Yeah,
Councillor Moore?
absolutely. So Catherine was explaining to me that council has like a relativity scheme, don't we? So if we move the bottom, everyone has to sort of move up a step. How set in stone is that scheme? I mean, who sets it? How is it adjusted? That sort of.
It's actually part of the employment contract with staff that we have on a scale.
Draw a kick in there.
Just for clarity.
What we use is we use an organisation to grade our jobs. Yep. Called strategic pay. So strategic pay will come up with a grade and we'll fit that grade in our union contracts or our individual contracts. So what happens when for argument's sake, the minimum wage goes up? What that does, that overtakes a certain number of grades. Yep. So everybody effectively moves who was below the minimum wage, they move up to the minimum wage. If they were above the minimum wage previously and now are below the minimum wage, they move up to the minimum wage as it currently stands. Then what we do is, as the market data comes through on a 12-month cycle, so the next time we do that, the market should have reflected because the concertina is down, the market should have reflected that and start to stretch it back out again. That works only as well as, or as long as the government don't change the minimum wage again. So, you keep getting that concertina effect and it takes time for it to stretch back out at the end. So in terms of relativity, we actually use strategic pay because they are independent. They use countrywide data. That's how we determine the level of grades and salaries that are paid on those grades.
If we were to move to the living wage, what would strategic pay do?
That we'd almost be on our own because strategic pay don't recognise the living wage as appropriate. It's not the word. They don't recognise it as an official starting point, I guess.
They actually base their data off the market data, so
Yes.
it's not based off a living wage or minimum wage. They have the data for about 70 councils and their wage range, so they use that to base their scale.
what will happen as more councils or more organisations move to the living wage.
There's a number of councils that do, and just get not do.
Yeah, and that will affect us going forward as the living wage starts to work its way into their stats. What I've said is for staff, we don't want to be involved in artificially changing things. What I want to be able to do is point to an independent outside grade that says that is what the market is for that particular grade at that particular step. So it gives it some independence. As living wages, as I said, flows through the economy more, then we will pick that up through our grading through strategic pay.
So you have more of a mechanism or a formula for maintaining that distance between wage bands?
We deal with it on a market basis. So this is what the market says that grade is worth, and that's what we will then pay staff.
But when something comes along like a minimum wage increase, that formula is applied across your wage bands.
That is reflected in the market data, but there may be a time delay as the grades higher than the minimum wage start to stretch out again and create relativity. Because the minimum wage comes in 1st of April. Strategic pays data because they collect market data. So this is actually physical stuff that people provide them, is to the 31st of March. So you've already got effectively a 12-month delay between, for argument's sake, the effect of the minimum wage coming in to when it applies through to strategic pay.
So a minimum wage increase doesn't automatically trigger a reconciliation of the...
Not for the people above the minimum wage, not necessarily, no. But what it would do is it will, because it's legislation, it will mean that we move all of the people who are currently below the new minimum wage up to the minimum wage. We don't necessarily keep their relativity. If they were $1 above the minimum wage, we don't keep them at $1 above the minimum wage.
Because you're basing it on what strategic pay stuff.
Because it's market data, yes.
Yeah. So that'll be picked up maybe 12 months down the track.
So if we, as a policy, said minimum we're going to pay is minimum wage, you just see that. What would happen?
The living wage or the minimum wage?
Living wage, sorry, yes.
Then
So everyone, like the minimum wage, everyone would move up to that.
we calculate that at about 400.
Was
No,
about-
no, that's if everyone moved.
Yeah, but you would have to, because what you would do if we move people to the living wage, then we would have to add, because the living wage, we don't know how long that would take to work its way through strategic pay. If 1 or 2 councils per year, that's not going to have a big impact on the market data. So we would do that, and then we would effectively shrink all of the relativities, and we would have to wait for however long it takes strategic pay to stretch those back out again. So for a staff member who's on $22 an hour, which is the living wage, if we move them up to that, someone on $25 an hour, instead of having a $4 or $5 differential between that person moved up, then they've got a $3 differential. How do I deal with restoring the differentials artificially, effectively, because we have made a choice? So what I would say to you is that it's more difficult because then you have to look at the entire organisation and say, well, for argument's sake, if the average movement to living wage was 4%, then to maintain relativities across everybody, I would have to move everybody by 4% to keep them in the same range, or keep the same relativities. Hopefully, over time, we would catch that up, but it's a guess to make that happen.
What about the councils?
I don't know. They've got bigger HR departments than I have.
Problem is, like, there's a lot of debate around the living wage, and there's no doubt that there is a minimum that people need to survive on. But, the problem is you there's a cost to every service you provide, whether it's actually a service to provide groceries or a service to supply, anything. So, if you put everyone up at the supermarket up to the living wage, you effectively increase the pound of butter or sugar or whatever. And then the same with the council, but their council bring up to the living wage. Like Paul's saying, we've got to bring the parity up on those lower scales, and that actually amounts, then all of a sudden you're faced with rate increases to people who are facing in deprivated areas anyway, who are struggling. So your pensioners and your people on the lower income just get it loaded back onto them on the other hand, because we can't lose it. So it's a really tricky situation, I believe, and also there's a chance for employers, to provide jobs for young people as well, and if you start off on the a higher rate, well, they might say, "Oh, and they become unemployed, or so it's a tricky question, I believe, but and paying the living wage is a cost, isn't there? It has to be passed along down the line, no matter whether you're a council or the other thing council will have to do, would have to look at all their subcontractors in that provide services, and then that could go up, then your cost of services go up. So, tricky one, really.
I mean, from my perspective, managing the process, it's a lot easier to point to an independent group saying that's what the market is saying. So we don't get into the arguments of, well, I think I'm worth more than what you're saying. Well, the market data is not showing that. Then you have another issue of, because the market data comes effectively in the lower quartile, which is the 25%. The median, which we pick the median or the upper quartile. So that's the 25% more than the median. Effectively, is there a factor that we should be taking into account because of where we live and the issues in attracting talent to the organisation, paying market median? So those are the types of things you can play around with to say the council's going to move everybody to the living wage. That then causes, I think, worse problems for people who weren't on the living wage and had a different relativity to people who are moving up. That relativity is now smaller, and I have had that conversation, well, not a direct conversation, but I've heard it anecdotally that people. I was paid above the medium, the minimum wage, and now I'm not. I paid the minimum wage because the minimum wage has moved up. I was a grade or two grades ahead. What this minimum wage has done is it's effectively eliminated for us grade 6, 7 and a half of grade 8, I think, because they're all on the same level now. So if I've got a lower skilled person who's now paid similar to a person who's
we might require them to have a special qualification, but they're actually no acknowledgement of the fact that they've been trained further than the other person because they're getting the same. But I think if you look at our salaries as a whole, there's not a lot below the living wage, and you'll probably find that they are more likely to be the positions where perhaps as a school student taking on the job, and so they're not actually providing for a household in their position.
Cool stuff.
It also destroys, because when we start out, we have 4 grades within 4 steps within each grade. So if you're starting out as a brand new out of school, or a new person to your role, we would start you off at a lower grade, lower step within the grade, because we want you to upskill, prove yourself, and you will move through the steps year after year, and you will get your increase up to where you become fully efficient and fully effective. That's being taken away now with this movement of the minimum wage. So we've not only have we lost the 3.5 grades, but the steps within those grades are all gone. So I couldn't even
just through the strategic pay eventually.
It should do. It should work its way through. As introduction of the living wage throughout the country should start to flow through the strategic pay data.
Okay, any more comments here? All those in favour?
Right.
Against? Motion carried. Local alcohol policy. Recommendation is there that the council is not intending to develop a West Coast local alcohol policy at this time. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Gibson, are there any comments? All those in favour? Motion carried. Parks and Tracks, review of council recommendation notes. It is no intention to review existing walking and cycling tracks and parks to create new ones at present due to other priorities. Council will note the interest and be in touch with the stakeholders when it is time to do so. Please. Councillor Green, seconder. Are there any comments here? As I said yesterday, I do believe that we do have some very good walking tracks close to our towns and our smaller suburbs, and if funding does become available for outside agencies, that it would be good to access that or to give it a good try. Those in favour? Motion carried. Planning considerations. Recommendation is that feedback be received and noted. And 2, the submitter be advised that these issues will be taken into consideration in future planning. Have a mover, please. Councillor McBride and seconder Councillor Gibson. Are there any comments? All those in favour? Motion carried. Playgrounds. Recommendation there on page 64. The council advises there is no funding available for additional shades to be provided at playgrounds. Council will consider the installation of signage reminding users to cover up as part of future improvements. And 3, that council advises that there are no immediate plans to upgrade Dixon Park and the playground equipment to be upgraded to renew as budgets allow. I'll move that. Second to Councillor Pedro. Are there any comments?
Just wondering, Bishop, please, have we got any obligations under health and safety to shade in our playgrounds?
Through the chair, I don't know. I addressed it through the suggested draft comments about covering up, individuals and parents and caregivers to remind people to cover up, slip, slop, sleep, as they say.
Yeah. I thought just Dixon Park had plenty of shade.
Through the chair, there is shade there.
The Act is a health and safety workplace. Dixon Park's in the workplace. It's a, so there would be, I don't believe any obligation for us to.
It's a moral obligation.
Not a moral obligation. I don't think it's a legal obligation. I think otherwise, if you had a legal obligation, every park would be covered. Have indoor stadiums to play rugby under.
Yeah, I guess if you compare it to school, they've got a shady area.
Yeah.
And they give the kids heads.
I do say that a lot of our playground equipment is starting to look run down and things are getting very tired in some of those areas, and hopefully in the future if we do something, we can look at it. So,
It may be something, Your Worship, we can signal to several of the service groups in town who are always looking for good projects, They're pretty full up at the moment, but they're good community projects that they could be, as long as they abide by the health and safety rules or the regulations for the equipment. But those groups are often little projects, and that might be one that fits in there well.
If you look at that playground's done for Central Christchurch, I think they've got some people in there.
we love one of them.
Yeah.
All those in favour?
It rains here all the time.
Yeah. It's not a water park, it's a huge one, and it's free. That's our destination.
That's great.
All those in favour? Aye. Motion carried. Private swimming lessons costs. So this was discussing the children with disabilities and the cost of swimming lessons. So the recommendation is that feedback be received and noted. Submitters be provided with a copy of the office comments, and staff be advised to look at the options for price concessions for disabled children for private swimming lessons. This is one that I would really like to see, that something actually does get done and we actually really address this issue, because especially like it's such a benefit to those children and the families, they have barriers in everyday life for everything. So if we can help in some way there, that would be great. Councillor McBride.
Yeah, I'm pleased to see staff there are going to look at these options. I've had two families that didn't want to be named approach me about this too, so it's good to see there was a submission on those fees. With regards to disabled children, they do struggle with that. You know, they've got to pay the one-on-one lessons, which is harder on the pocket than the group lessons, and the child, you know, that they're not getting the full 20 minutes anyway, because the kids sort of hard to contain sometimes, you know, so and it's such an important thing for them too, to have that water safety. So I'm pleased that that's getting addressed.
Totally, I agree too. I think it's also that for a lot of families, they'll use the private lessons for maybe a week or two, but for these people, they actually use them for quite a longer period of time.
Yes.
It's an ongoing part of the activity. It's about accessibility around our disability policies.
Has anyone got any idea of how many people are involved?
Probably be more if it was less, you know what I mean?
I just wondered, you know, because surely.
It's well used, for sure. But yeah, like Tim said, it takes a lot longer to get that child up to scratch compared to, say, an able-bodied child.
Once again, I'd support that as well and start coming back, you know, at future time of, you know, proposal of those price concessions. I'd definitely support that.
Some circumstances also a therapeutic thing as well. So
Yes, like respite care a little bit, you know, great.
I'll move that. Can I have a second,
I'm
please?
thinking that.
Councillor McDonald, are there any comments? No, all those in favour? Population decline. Paul Warner, recommendation and feedback is received and noted. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Becker, second councillor Hay. Any comments there?
We're already doing that for hotels, aren't we?
Beat me to it. Find out emergency housing hotels.
All those in favour? Motion carried. Productivity Commission recommendation, feedback be received and noted. I'll move that. Can I have a second, please? Councillor McDonald, thank you. Any comments? All those in favour? Public toilets. There has been a few submissions there for public toilets. Recommendation there, council is advised to establish any additional public toilets at this stage. And two, the council advises that the upgrade of Anzac Park toilets is scheduled for year one. I'll move that. Can I have a second, please? Councillor had it. So yes, well, we did talk out at the drop-in centre at Dobson and did go over the issues with the public toilets and adding more into the maintenance budgets at this time, because we have done quite a significant amount of the TIP funding. More comments here?
Would there be such a thing as a list of within council of locations so that maybe they could be prioritised should funding become available? Mel?
Sorry, through the chair.
Yeah, through the chair, I have kept a list, and we have knocked off a few in recent years, being Bahali and Jones Park and so forth. Yeah, so the other ones that have come up from time to time is Domain Terrace and Mitchell's. So yeah, we'd certainly update that list and keep it current.
Was it Anzac Park on Tuesday? And yeah, that's that we really need to, yeah, that's pretty disgraceful. That one down there needs really upgrading.
It does, definitely does. The Anzac Park's really, I'm really pleased that's actually happening. And also, you know, I guess through the chair, Mel, we will have a budget to slowly upgrade our existing Greymouth toilets, which are, some of them are looking a wee bit shabby. You know, the one at the one over by Dixon Park, it's looking rather tired, you know, and I don't know if we've got a budget in there for refurbishment of those things.
Yeah, the maintenance and renewal would be to ensure that we comply with the current building regulations, but beyond that, not really much to be frank. Yeah. No significant upgrades here.
Have a look at those, because I did have the opportunity to go into one over there just recently, and it was looking quite tired and shabby, you know, for one on the main road. Everything wears after a while.
sorry, Mel, is there a ballpark figure that you could attribute to the installation of a toilet? So just for my benefit, roughly 100,000 or?
About 184 is what's in the budget. That is a class toilet.
Yes,
And that would be indicative of a new toilet anywhere sort of thing?
Yeah.
I think that's for two units.
Yeah.
And it will have a sort of a cover thing down over the front, which can be utilised for barbecues or whatever.
So it's a significant amount.
Yeah. I think, I mean, didn't want to raise it too much, but it's a full replacement of that facility. The current one's not fit for purpose, really.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Rapahoe, some issues out there with some infrastructure that needs to, the staff are going to comment there, so the recommendation is.
Can I declare an interest, please?
Okay, councillor Hayes declaring interest. The recommendation is that council will consider issues such as rating Airbnbs as part of its next rating review. And council are.
No,
Missed it.
No.
It had got us.
Oh, I've gone right down to the.
Oh, there.
I missed you on top of the page. Feedback be received and noted. So council are working with the community in those areas, and we'll be looking into Mr. Adams's address that he gave us yesterday as well. So the recommendation is that we receive it and it is noted. I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Councillor Gibson,
Yeah.
comments?
Footpaths on the main road, is that their responsibility or is it NTA?
Currently, yes, and it comes up in a later submission. We did build that footpath along the front of Rapahoe there on the state highway many years ago.
Councillor McBride.
I mean, I hadn't heard this until Mr. Adams said, but with regards to the pipe or the budget already being set by central government, was that actually true and correct what he said, and what did happen to the funding if that is correct?
I've asked Paul to investigate that this morning, so I think it's going to take a bit of time.
Yeah, we'll be getting prepared for this, so.
Staff report back.
Yep.
Yeah, a little bit of history. There was a significant subdivision proposed on the left side of Rapahoe just before you turn into the township. And we did work with the developer at the time. We were looking at extending the sewer to Rapahoe at that time, but that subdivision fell away, didn't proceed. As to any grants, we would have to research that.
Is that the Tillers?
Yes.
Were they going to pitch in or something, or was it actually?
Are they,
Yeah,
should answer they'd have to, but it was going to be a joint.
right.
Yeah.
Councillor McBride, was that what you were?
Yeah, I just, want to clarify that one as well. And maybe, how do we go about putting these things into the next thing? Who decides that?
Well, ultimately, the council get to decide that through the development of the.
Yeah.
But I guess that if the need comes up earlier, then that process goes through the annual plan, or outside of those, we'll put a paper up to council that says this is an urgent need of doing, we need to fund it, we need to not do this other project. So that can all be done at that.
I commented, part of this was probably would like to put a surge in as a target, that we'd say, well, targeted, you got so few ratepayers there, it could be quite prohibitive.
Yeah, no, but I was just
Without
wondering,
subsidy,
to have a look at it and see if there was that subsidy and see whatever is
Yeah,
available. at the
definitely with
time.
the subsidy we do.
Yeah, and I think getting back to that guy too, because he'd obviously like to know the outcome.
Spend a lot of money.
Yeah,
He did a lot of research.
Well, because he was told, no, you're not doing this because this is going to go and happen and this is what you got to do. And he was telling me the story about it, just,
I get that about that. I forgot that about that subdivision, but that was actually quite a large subdivision if it was going to go ahead.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so that would make
Get them
sense.
time.
Yeah.
Should be now.
All those in favour? Motion carried. Rate Airbnbs, the council will consider issues such as at the next rating review, Airbnbs
Can I declare an interest?
as part of the next rating review.
No, rating reviews will trigger a special consultative procedure, which we don't want to do, so we normally would tie those in with an LTP. You know, bulleted theirs not so long ago, they pulled away from it because of the controversy around it, but you would usually do it as part of your revenue and financing policy and your funding policies prior to an LTP. So we'll do it, and it will take probably that long to actually lay the groundwork and get it done. It's not a easy task to do. But Catherine's looking forward to doing it.
I'll move that one. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Gibson. Any more comments? We are doing some work on that with LTP as well. Turning to page 68, rates. We had quite a lot of feedback there. As
Declare an interest again, please.
declaring interest in the rates.
Yes.
Oil.
Jenny Hayes' name is in the.
Oh.
So I say,
Thanks, Mary. Yeah. Okay, so there was a lot of feedback there as we expected. We've not felt this easy either this year. So the recommendations that feedback be received and noted. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Becker and a seconder. Councillor McBride, are there any comments?
Just a question. The library, we want to pay off by the end of this plan, correct? 10 years. Given that it's a long-term asset for a long time, why could we consider running it out for longer?
We could have, but that would have put our debt levels, kept our debt levels high. And what we're actually trying to do is bring them down so if a natural disaster happens, we've got capacity to borrow up to our cap and then trigger the government's contribution to that. So that is why we're using short-term debt effectively over the years 5 to 9.
There's actually an limit, it's about 1.5 million to be on loan at the library.
So effectively what, and this is it's almost a byproduct of the stance that we've taken to have the rate levels at as they currently are, so that we're creating the ability to generate reserves and transform us from a debt organisation to having cash in the bank and reserves, so we can start funding replacements, etc., going forward from our own reserves rather than the bank from debt.
Any more comments?
I'm surprised how little amount of submissions there was on it. I was expecting a lot more people going to talk about that. And most of these are like federated farmers, community health. You know, it's not private people.
I think from what we see around the country of other councils that we're going okay, but
Yeah, they're always
it's been easy.
I think it's just bad, like rabbit hole, because it's not 9%, 18%. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that is weird. That's huge. Yeah.
In terms of some of those rate rises, that is due to, or even rates decreases. If you look at Moana, that went down, and that's because of the rating structures that we've got in place. In terms of the zones, we've got 3 zones, and it in some ways artificially raises and lowers rates. So you've got Moana, is it Hara's in the same zone as Moana? Zone 3.
Yeah, and the land values are a lot higher there.
Yeah, so Moana's land value is a lot higher than a lot of the same in zone 3. But the zone 3's got a positive increase and Moana got a decrease. Now that's a problem.
Got to go to capital.
Well, I think there's a lot of issues with the rating system, and that's been highlighted. Your wealthier homeowners or people who own, you know, nice blocks of land actually ended up paying less than your average homeowner, and that doesn't seem right to me. But,
No.
It's got to be worked out fair.
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
and I'd love to move to capital value. Just saying.
Detrimental effects for some, and it's not going to be easy regardless. Sounds of it. Those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Refuge disposal, Mr. Alex Woods, the recommendation that council declines the request to establish an approved landfill site for asbestos material. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Gibson and a seconder, Councillor Moore. Any comments there?
Raises some valid points. It's just, yeah, such a
We've already got one.
tough one.
Thanks, but
All those in favour? Motion carried. Register of Community Services, the recommendation here, it's there that the submitter be provided with a copy of the officer comments, and we do to some extent do have some of the, do have that brochure there with the clubs and organisations. I'll move that kind of second place. Councillor Green, any comments there? Those in favour? Motion carried. Funds, Mr. Michael and Jean colouring again, so the recommendations submitted be provided with a copy of the officer's comments. I'll remove it, please. Seconder, Councillor Kay. Those up for the comments. Those in favour? Motion carried. Footpath maintenance, so the recommendation here is that feedback be received and noted, and council decline the request to extend the footpath to the end of Balance Street due to other budget priorities. As submitters be provided a copy of officer comments. So mover, please. Councillor McDonald and a seconder, Councillor McBride. This is always a contentious one, and we just do, we need to make sure that that extra budget is done well. Any more comments there?
Just shows once again how those drop-ins work. You look at the submissions on that too, you know, most of them are Ranunga area. So they really got behind filling those forms out, which is good.
So who is responsible for the paths, and, you know, are we? Because, you know, some of them are shocking. You know, so who's checking the checkers? Yeah. And the drains, you know, with highways, you know. So.
at the Kaiara adoption drop-in, the Kaiara residents were asking about the footpath replacement along through the Kaiara township there, and that was actually approved in the previous LTPs and annual plans to upgrade after water reticulation was provided. And I just wonder if staff could actually have a look and report back to us on that, because I don't know if all the money was quite spent at the time on doing down Golf Links Road, or whether there was some money still in the fund there, because the Kaiara residents had come to council and it was approved that we actually did do a big footpath upgrade along there, and that was some of the comments they made at the drop-in, quite a few of the residents here. But there may be, I don't know if there's any hidden in the tin there still or not, so could staff actually report back at a future date on whether there's potentially anything there, because I know we actually held it back at the time because we knew there was potentially a water upgrade happening. So those people have quite spoken at that numerous ones.
The question here, Tony Cox was at the meeting at Kaiara Hall one night. He confirmed with the board they would be getting their footpath. I don't know what basis he could give them the confirmation, but that's where their expectancy is there.
Subject to funding.
Well, they did come along and they submitted to the plan council, and previous council actually, or, you know, I distinctly remember Mrs. Cogger came along and quite a few of the residents, and they actually, council actually did allocate money for that. But it'd be a matter of actually, sorry, staff going back through the records and having a look and see what happened to that. And then it got put aside because it was silly to do it until it's upgraded.
Look into that, please.
Do we do audits of the workmanship? Because I need one ratepayer on Kilgour Road say they showed me their footpath that had been recently done with chip seal, I think, and there was grass growing through it, like only about a month or two later.
Yeah, through the chair and CEO, yes, and we've already highlighted some of that, those issues, and we've raised it in relation to defects. Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk, and that's a lot of people come to us with complaints about work that is being done, that it's not being done up to standard, and that's one thing that we're quite concerned about, and that needs to be kept an eye on, that we're paying for work. needs to be up to a good standard for the years to come.
And I know we don't, but is there a way that we can hold retention money back? Like, if I do a job for a builder, they normally hold back 10% until such time as a period goes by.
Defects liability.
Through the chair, yes, we do. Yep.
You do?
Yep.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Most jobs, yeah, especially big ones. Yeah.
Those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Roadside litter, Bernadette Farrell, recommendation is there that council will follow up with contractors for local roads. And the feedback will be passed to NZTA Whakatahi with regards to state highways. With that, can I have a second, please? Councillor Vicker, any comments there?
I think that the state highways are probably that's the worst one. We really need to be quite firm. I'm going to get them to clean them up.
McDonald's,
I did the other day, there was some complaint about some on the Renault, on the Compton Hill there, and it was done just like that, so that was quite pleasant, done at the end of the
Yeah, that was
day.
bad there.
So that was something.
I had a friend who took his wheelbarrow all the way from Blackwell to Moonlight over a period of time. He would walk every Sunday and just pick up all the rubbish all the way there and back, and then dump it up at the dump. Took him months.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Rubbish bins, grade high students there, so submitters be provided with a copy of the officer comments. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Gibson, thank you. Any comments there? All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Renunga Water. The recommendation feedback be received and noted and submitted be provided with a copy of the officer's comments. Mover, please. Councillor Gibson and a seconder. Councillor Hay. Comments there?
The stuff supplied to the submitters, will it have like the legal stuff in it from, the Ministry of Health will say you cannot have chlorine and all that sort of stuff.
You mean, do I want to send it again?
Yeah, I know, but I understand that, but they're all in there. We highlight it, maybe.
All those in favour? Motion carried.
Actually, we were talking.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Councillor McBride.
Yeah, just wondering with regards to the treatment on plant that we actually passed with the previous council to go ahead with, what is happening there with that again? I don't know whether that's come up, been away or something, but are we doing something with that?
The actual
With the asset of the equipment and everything that we've already
What
got.
we were looking at doing is investigating some possibility as to bottled water and using the bottling plant from Monteith's, but that doesn't seem to be panning out. So I guess we're getting to the end of our options. So it'll mean that the last option is to see if we can sell.
Is it useful to keep in case of the Alpine fault claim as a backup?
It would, my understanding, and you might correct me, Mel, is that there's only sufficient. We'd like to keep it to supply the hospital, if it capacity to supply the hospital. But again, it's got the bridge that could be a problem. So, I mean, it's you're going to have an argument if you keep it and don't hand the money back. Why are you still got that asset there? I do take the point that it would probably be useful. So that could form part of our thought process. Yeah.
Motion carries. Smoke-free policy, the recommendation is that council notes the outdoor dining policy and includes no vaping and appears to work well. There are no plans to review the policy, to review the existing smoke-free public places policy at this time. I'll move that. Second, please. All right, thank you. Any comments? Those in favour? All right. Stormwater drains and Aroa, very high students, council working. That through to Kaitahi ETA. And with that, second, please. Councillor McDonald. Comments? All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Teetering O Waitangi, Sport Canterbury West Coast. The feedback be received and noted. I'll move that. Seconder, please. Councillor Green, thank you. Any comments? All those in favour?
Aye.
Three Waters reform, Alex Woods and Paul Berry, that submitted be advised that council is awaiting the outcome of the Three Waters reform. I'll move that. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Gibson, are there any comments?
Who knows? What's gonna happen?
No, we're still. Yeah.
There was a good story on TV3 this morning on the AM show.
Oh, there was. The figures are horrendous.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Tourism, Joe Hart and verify students. Relevant feedback will be passed on to Development West Coast. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Becker, thank you. Any comments?
I just have one comment. Have we got any funding to actually give us some signage for Coal Creek Falls? Is that under our mandate to promote that, or is that Development West Coast?
It's the doc. Well, to point in the direction. Or out there.
Yeah, it needs something big like those spectacular ones that go up and through the bollard there. Like they really promote those places.
Yeah, through the chair, CEO, we could provide some tourism directional signage similar to what we've done to the Blackwater and the pillbox area, those big brown and white signs.
Great.
Do we have one for the pool too? What you're out there?
And for the toilets at Rappaholly. Toilets at Rappaholly. All those in favour?
Signage for that.
The motion carried. Trees in the CBD. Recommendation that feedback be received and noted and submitted be provided with a copy of the officer's comments. Come mover, some more, seconder. They're all going to sleep. Councillor Bright. Any comments there? All those in favour?
Aye.
Getting there. Motion carried. Upgrade roading eastern end of Coe Street, Moana. Steve Holmes and Susan Gibson. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Becker. Any comments here?
Yeah, I brought this up with council probably 5 years ago. This work done. I'm surprised with the answer now. I mean, council went and looked at it and said they didn't have the budget at the time, and now it says it's their responsibility.
Someone have the money though.
Whatever the money as well, but yeah, because I put made it 5 years ago.
Any comments there?
Could someone look into it, please? No?
Sorry, so you want us to look into the fact that you brought it up 5 years ago and what the decision was then?
The decision was that they never had the funding, and they were told to resubmit it in the annual payment,
Right,
which they have done every year, and I did it for 1 year.
right.
And now it actually says here that it's responsibility of the owner.
Councillor Klein's request.
The last section does actually say that if we were to do it, it would be around $52,000 and we would need to allocate funding from other.
Can you speak up a bit, Catherine?
The last bullet
I
point,
see the last place here.
yeah, does say the cost, and if we were to do it, we would have to allocate it from somewhere else. I think the first point is just pointing out that overall responsibility for the access way is for the benefiting property owner.
From memory, the drain was right beside the school and everything. I'm quite concerned about it. Safety concerns.
There's a lot of little right of ways all around the place.
This is on the street that Mia lived on.
We can't have been important.
Yeah.
I just had to point it out.
Gotta look. Okay. All those in favour? Aye. Motion carried. Upgrade of the spa pool at Western Recreation Centre. So the recommendation is that council declines to fund the request due to other priorities and the increased operational costs involved. So I do acknowledge that they put this petition and a lot of people did want it, but it does seem that, well, it's going to cost a lot more than $10,000, and again, it would have been on the ratepayer, and we have we just can't do it to them right now. And that's, I'll move that.
Second, just a clarification question. What are, you say UV headings? I'm thinking they're ultraviolet, but what are you? Ultraviolet?
It'll be like a protection in terms of keeping the water safe. UV, the ultraviolet, UV sensors.
If they were to raise the money to build it themselves, just a question, just asking them.
Nelia's now had a chance to talk to someone who could do this and said you're looking at anywhere between $60,000 to $100,000 to get it installed. And as you can see, there's actually going to be a lot more
To run it.
Yeah, to make it run. It's not going to be that easy.
It's a lovely idea.
Yeah.
It's just.
To me, it's indicative of our actual lack of a therapeutic pool. And one of the reasons for that submission was the fact that therapeutic pool's been taken away. I mean, that's a big thing. And I'm not sure putting jets into that actual spa is going to solve that problem. We really need a fit for purpose pool, which maybe the Spring Creek pool could be. It's a source of funding.
Oh, it's one of the year.
I mean, the realism is with that pool that it's actually a major job with the line and all that in there, and it's been redone.
Yes.
You know, some years ago when we had all the problem with failing, and that would have been the better time to do it. But it would be far cheaper to put in a spa pool. You know, charge for it than actually have that big pool because of all the factors and the cleanliness and those higher things. So it's unaffordable. It's a great idea, but I think it's one of those jobs that needs some alternative funding like that. It's a great idea, but it'd be a major shutdown of that. Last time it was shut down for 6 months or more.
It'd be worth, I think, giving the officers' comments to.
That's, they would get that.
They will anyway.
Yep.
All those in favour? Aye. West Coast Food Security Network, the recommendation, council notes the issue with interest and advises staff will engage with the local network as necessary. Can I have a mover, please?
I'll have a mover.
Councillor Hatter and a seconder, Councillor Green. Any comments there?
I was just surprised that food was disappearing before it got to depot. That was
Yeah, that's what
that's, extremely worrying. And I don't think it would take too much for them to start investigating that themselves, but yeah, that's a big concern.
Western Recreation Centre maintenance, recommendation that the submitter be thanked for their concerns and advised they will be looked into. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hay, thank you. So this is going to be done, rust visible in the floor areas.
Which is interesting because it's a new floor.
Well, that's what I was inferring to.
So I will check that out.
Thank you. Any more comments there?
I thought everything would be stainless steel.
It's great.
No.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Youth Development Strategy. The recommendation that council will note the interest and be in touch with interested stakeholders when it's time to create a youth development strategy. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Moore. And we do, through the Youth Trust, put our youth portfolio holder on to that trust, which is me, and we do a substantial amount of work, and that's how council look on the youth strategy, and we have developed strategies throughout the Youth Trust just recently. So there is work being done in that space, but just not directly as a council job. All those in favour? Motion carried. Basic operating system money. Richard. Okay, recommendation that feedback be received and noted.
Can we all see
it? Councillor Gibson. Are there any more comments?
I'm going to actually try and get hold of Richard again because I'd really like to see how we do about money. He's never quite got through this last one.
We will be seeing him, no doubt.
Yep.
So, all those in favour? Okay, non-core activities included in the plan from, I was going to say, Paul Berry. Feedback is received and noted. I'll move that. I'm a second, please. Councillor Green, all those in favour?
All right.
Okay.